Well, back in the 1990s, millions of men across America attended massive rallies in stadiums that were life-changing for these husbands, fathers, and young men. In an era where masculinity is branded by some to be toxic, Promise Keepers is back, helping a new generation of men fulfill their biblical roles as good husbands, fathers, friends, and servant leaders. From Promise Keepers, please welcome Chairman Ken Harrison and President Vance Day. Good to have you both here, Ken, Vance. Thank you for joining us. Vance, you've been with us a couple of times before, this in a completely new role, but you were here because you were in all kinds of conflict with the state of Oregon over your judgeship, which you were a judge. Before we get to the Promise Keepers, just tell us how that finally got resolved.
Well, Governor, it was a great privilege to serve the state of Oregon as a judge. And when they came after me for not agreeing to marry same-sex couples, it was a little bit traumatic. But there were thousands upon thousands of people, including your viewers, who stepped up to the plate and helped us through that 4-year battle. And the bottom line is, their case collapsed. I was totally exonerated, and
great news.
It is good news.
And so now you're working with Ken, with Promise Keepers, and I think it's exciting that Promise Keepers is back. Ken, let's talk about how did Promise Keepers, it kind of went dark for a while. I mean, we didn't hear about the big stadium rallies. What was maybe the genesis that caused you and others to say, it's time to bring this back and bring it to a whole new generation of young men in America?
Well, I watched the news.
Yeah, good point.
I started asking myself, who's my daughter going to marry? Who's going to teach my sons how to be a man? And too many men aren't doing their jobs, and they haven't been taught by their fathers how to teach their kids how to be men, how to teach young women to have self-esteem and to value themselves and for their future husbands.
You know, I think sometimes we forget that the primary role of a parent is to train his or her replacement.
That's right.
And if we're not actively doing that, we've got very confused, chaotic kids, and that's what we're seeing a lot with younger people, utterly lost in a culture that doesn't even say that it's okay to be masculine. It's okay to be a man. What's wrong with us?
The book of Malachi, God says, the purpose of marriage is I want godly offspring. That's our whole point.
Yeah.
And men are responsible for teaching their families Scripture.
So Vance, we're going to see the first big rally of Promise Keepers coming up in Arlington, Texas, at a little venue called the AT&T Stadium there that seats about 100,000 people. Tell us about that event.
you imagine 80,000 men together, praising God, repenting, understanding who they are in Dallas Cowboy Stadium. That'll happen July 31st and August 1st, 2020. But our plan is to simulcast it to 20 to 30,000 locations, if that's possible, Governor.
20 or 30,000 locations?
We want to touch the lives of between 4 and 5 million men that weekend.
Wow, that is an ambitious goal for sure. Ken, how will you begin between now? I mean, that's a year away, almost exactly a year away. What do you do to get that many individual men and churches and men's groups to be prepared for something like that?
You know, you reach the pastors. They're desperate for help. And things have changed so much. In the 90s, the church wasn't necessarily aligned with Promise Keepers in a lot of ways. Now we're finding it completely different. Pastors are desperate for help. They don't know what to do with their men. Pornography is an epidemic in the world and in the church. And pastors don't know how to deal with it. And so we're going to take on two issues very specifically next year: abortion, because there's never been an abortion in the history of the world a man didn't have something to do with, and pornography, because it's destroying families.
You know, a lot of times people don't think that abortion has anything to do with men, and you think it's only a women's issue. And you're saying that's just not an accurate depiction. And certainly we understand about the biological fact, but we're also seeing men who say, wait a minute, you're about to end the life not just of your baby, but mine. And I want to have a say in that.
That's absolutely right. And we also need to be concerned for women we had nothing to do with. There are a lot of women out there who are hurting. They're pregnant and that man has left her. What are we doing in the church to take care of that woman? Let's reach out to them and take care of their needs so that they can choose to have their baby until we can reverse that awful law.
When Promise Keepers was at its peak back in the 90s, I remember a lot of the criticism from feminists who said, This is all about subjugating women and making them inferior. Respond to that criticism from 20 years ago.
Well, it's understandable, Governor, that women feel that men have sometimes lorded it over them because men have.
Yeah.
But men aren't designed to lead that way, to love that way. We are designed to sacrifice ourselves for others. Mm-hmm. And so what's happened is men have checked out. But the reality is men make men. It takes a man to help a younger man understand how they fit into society, how they lead, how they do marriage. And so that's why Promise Keepers is, and hundreds of men's ministries along with it, are so needed today. And that's why it's coming back.
Ken, you've got a book. It's called The Rise of the Servant Kings. And I think it's an important title. When you talk about servant kings, I mean, that's not something that I just hear in daily conversation. What is a servant king?
Every man is responsible to be a king in his own sphere, to be a leader in his sphere. A single man, to stand up for the poor and the oppressed, to stand up for justice, as God says he wants in Isaiah. For a married man to be a king, a leader to his wife and kids, but as a servant, not as a ruler, but as someone who lays down his life for his family like Christ did for the church, as it says in Ephesians 5:25. Well,
I hope people will, first of all, get the book, Rise of the Servant Kings, and download a free chapter of the book at riseoftheservantkings.com. Get a little taste of it. I bet you'll want the whole book. You'll also find Ken on social media through his handle at Ken R. Harrison. You can pre-register already for the Big Promise Keepers event in Arlington, Texas, July the 31st and August the 1st, 2020. It's a year from now at promisekeepers.org. And I hope that indeed millions and millions of men will be a part of this extraordinary weekend.